Several years ago, I covered a case that was beyond creepy. If anything, it turned out to be more of a phenomena than a singular case, and it ended up being quite a rabbit hole of information. And of course, being who I am, I couldn't say no to delving into it. What unfolded before me as I dug deep was an extremely elaborate tale of a supposed demon manifesting in people's lives through the use of Ouija boards, hexes and curses tied to this thing, angry and terrifying encounters, and so much more, all tying back to a singular entity or demonic force that went by several names, but its most famous was Zozo. I've recently revisited this case in my own personal research out of sheer curiosity once again, and have since gained some newer information that I hadn't initially come across. There's details that maybe I missed or omitted in the original video, and I'll be sharing my encounters with some people I had dealt with and spoken to regarding this entity when I originally made the first video. I'm doing these revisited episodes in an effort to not only remain as honest and open about my research into these topics as possible, but to revisit my own roots to better improve my content moving forward. I now present to you a revisited version of this story, and I promise you, there is a ton of new information. There's theories and more to delve into, so you will absolutely want to stick around from start to finish. For some of you, if you are new here, if you enjoy deep dives into real hauntings, dark history, demonic encounters, unsolved disappearances, and so much more, then you're in the right place. This is one of the scarier and perplexing cases I've covered, so I would not recommend watching this video alone or in the dark, or both, if you like a challenge. Now, let's begin.
Throughout history, it has been speculated that many have been plagued by an ancient demonic force. From Mesopotamia to more modern times, this evil and terrifying entity has said to enter our world and wreak havoc upon those who dwell within it. When a seemingly normal family disregards the warnings and partakes in multiple Ouija board sessions, what happened next nearly destroyed them. This is the untold story of the demonic Zozo house of Oklahoma and the abhorrent creature that stalks its walls. Oklahoma City, a small but growing city in the heartland of America, known for blue-collar work and brick-and-mortar shops, red dirt, and sports, would soon become known for something much darker. A teenager by the name of Darren Evans was growing up here, a normal boy by all accounts, doing things that any teenagers would enjoy, hanging out with friends, shenanigans here and there, and dating girls. He began dating a girl named Brandy who attended school with him, and the two often found themselves visiting each other as often as they could, whether that was walking to and from school, in between classes, or visiting each other's homes. One day, while Brandy's home was having some plumbing work done on some pipes located underneath the house, the plumber doing the work would soon make a strange discovery. Located below the foundation of the home, covered in dirt, was an old Ouija board. The front letters were partially buried, and the back of the board was solid black in color. Off to the side of where the board was found was an aged planchette. What made this finding even more bizarre was that 4 old jars sat on the corners of the board, speckled with dirt as well. Thinking perhaps the kids had stashed the board away and forgot about it, the worker told the young couple after his work was done about what he had found. And it's from here that things seemingly take a darker turn. Upon examining the discovery, they began to brush the dirt away from the jars. They were then shocked by what they found. Inside each one of the jars, sitting on the 4 corners of the board, were the decaying bodies of blackbirds, congealed blood and matter still present. Bewildered but intrigued, they sat the jars off to the side and picked up the board. As soon as his fingers made contact with the board, Darren seemed to have an instant connection with it. And with this soon came a burning curiosity to examine it. And this curiosity would manifest into obsession. With this, the couple took the board inside the home, where they spoke with Brandy's mother. She actively practiced the Wiccan religion, but had no idea who could have put the board there. Several days later, curious as most teenagers are, Darren was an avid music fan, and one night, after building up the courage to do it, he decided he was going to contact the deceased singer of the popular band AC/DC, a man named Ronald Belford Scott, using the board. Scott had passed away from alcohol poisoning in 1980. After lighting several candles, laying the board with letters facing towards him, and placing the planchette upon the board, he began his session. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but Darren was still feeling this otherworldly connection to something within the board itself. After trying for half an hour, to his shock and amazement, the planchette began to move. Slowly at first, it then frantically began to move by itself, moving from Z to O, Z to O, over and over and over again, spelling out the name Zozo. Shocked and unsure of what or who he had contacted, Darren said goodbye in an attempt to end the session. Before his eyes, he saw the planchette spell out, "See you in hell," and then it threw itself across the room. A now terrified and bewildered Darren ran out of his room and tried to make sense of what had just taken place. But this was just the beginning of what was to come. It started with horrible night terrors. He would wake up unable to move or speak, and would hear whispering in his ears. These episodes at night were soon followed by banging and knocking throughout his house during the daytime, as well as a constant feeling as if he was being watched by something he couldn't see. But despite the presence he was feeling, Darren now sought answers to his ever-growing list of questions, just what exactly he had uncovered. So, he continued to hold sessions with the board, for better or for worse. Darren would later quote this: "The sessions now were as intense and paranormal as anything I've ever witnessed. A deep and terrible moaning could be heard emanating through the walls after these sessions. I developed sleep paralysis and became reclusive to society in general. I was once again messing with Zozo and Ouija boards, despite the terrors of my earlier sessions, in which I had promised myself I would never do it again. But again and again, I did." When not in use, the board was kept in a purple silk cloth and stored in his bedroom closet. it would also often go missing, sometimes for days on end. When checking back where he had placed it in order to set up and initiate a new session, the board would seemingly vanish, only to reappear at random times, as if it was the one calling the shots of when it could be seen and used. The years came and went, and the sessions on the mystical Ouija board continued. Darren, by this time, started inviting his friends to partake in the sessions, and although their sessions with him would prove he's not insane, it's of little consolation considering the tragedy they would seemingly manifest later on. Darren's best friend was a man by the name of Randy. The two had bonded over their love for the band AC/DC in high school and had been inseparable ever since. Randy's idol also being the late Bon Scott, whose lifestyle seemingly imprinted upon the youthful teens once upon a time, and perhaps would ultimately lead to the downfall of one of them. By now, Darren was living in his own apartment and working construction. At a job site he was on, he would make a strange but familiar discovery. As he was digging down into the earth, he found what appeared to be a jar. Upon picking it up to discard it, he wiped away the dirt and debris, only to be shocked by its familiar contents. Lo and behold, within the jar was a congealed and rotting blackbird, extremely similar, if not identical, to the ones initially found alongside the Ouija board underneath his high school girlfriend's home all those years ago. It was particularly weird, not just because of this, but the fact that he had found it, digging down deep into the earth. He wondered, what were the odds of this? And although he had no way of knowing for sure, his gut began to tell him that there was some kind of witchcraft or occult expertise at play here. Perhaps someone or a group of people were knowingly contacting this entity known as Zozo, but for what remained to be known. One evening in 1985, Darren and Randy were relaxing at Darren's apartment when they decided to host a session on the Ouija board. Randy, more than anything, wanted to try and make contact with his late idol, Bon Scott. While wearing a Highway to Hell AC/DC shirt, Randy's intent was clear. The two dimmed the lights, lit a couple of candles, and began the session upon the board. They made contact within a few minutes. Once the planchette was moving, Randy exclaimed, "We want to talk to Bon Scott of AC/DC." With this sentence, the planchette seemingly obliged. It moved in circles, eventually spelling out AYEMATE. The two looked at each other in amazement. The entity was using Australian dialects. And for anyone who doesn't know, Bon Scott was Australian. After several more questions, both of the young men were convinced they were speaking with their idol. The spirit seemed to know every little detail to any question they asked. And during the session, the entity then made a strange request from the men. It asked them to light a cigarette and place it in the hole in the planchette. What proceeded to make both of them laugh also made them quite spooked as well. So they lit a couple cigarettes, one for each of them, and one for this entity. They took a few drags to keep it lit, and then placed it cherry side up in the planchette hole. The planchette then spelled out thanks. They then watched in utter amazement as the cherry of the cigarette lit up, as if Bon himself was taking puffs off of it. But this amusement was short-lived. Once the cigarette had seemingly been smoked, the planchette began to spell something very different. It spelled, "F you, Randy. I will have your soul, and I'll see you in hell. Zozo. Zozo." Terrified, the men quickly ended the session by saying goodbye and tossing the board outside the second-story apartment balcony door. Clearly scared and upset, Randy also didn't take kindly to threats. He began cussing out Zozo with complete and utter rage. The board would later be returned by his downstairs neighbor. And after this session, a series of lows for both of the men seemed to manifest in the years to come. Influenced by the lifestyle of his idol, Randy fell victim to alcoholism. He soon would lose his wife to divorce and have split custody with his son. And although many opportunities presented themselves for Randy to better his life, for one reason or another, he was always just too far away to be able to grasp them. He often said to Darren, "I feel like I'm in a prison, and I can't escape." For old time's sake, the two did one last Ouija board session together in 2005, in which Randy asked the board how he would die. The board responded, "In a car, at night, alone." In 2007, after spending the evening with Darren, the last words he would say to him were, "Darren, I will see you in hell." The next morning, Darren received a phone call from Randy's girlfriend, Alicia, saying that Randy never made it home after he left. Instead, he had passed away in a violent head-on collision, ultimately passing away in a car, at night, and alone. This devastating passing, along with the frequent contact with the entity known as Zozo over the years, led to a fascination and borderline obsession with a search for answers for Darren Evans. During the time before and after Randy's death, he had been living in a home in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, that would become synonymous with the demon's name. It was here that the worst afflictions brought on by the entity would take place to him and his family. Darren's fascination with the occult led him to hanging on to and possessing multiple Ouija boards and other various occult objects. It was here that he began to study on a much more in-depth and organized basis, just trying to figure out who or what Zozo was. But this research would soon be interrupted. In this home lived himself, his wife Kathleen, and their young daughter at the time. During a session with his wife Kathleen one evening, while their daughter slept rooms away, Zozo would once again make itself present in their lives, but this time seemed to take possession of Darren. Kathleen trembled with fear and bated breath as something stared at her through Darren's eyes. Something that clearly wasn't human. He then turned violent, attempting to attack her. Fortunately for Kathleen, she was able to say goodbye and get away before any harm could be done to her. Several minutes later, Darren would come back to himself, with no memory of what had taken place. After this session, things seemed to escalate in intensity. Sounds began to rap throughout the entire home, from knocking to hissing, footsteps, and banging, all seemingly with no explainable origin. The family got so terrified that they sectioned off a particular bedroom upstairs, calling it their safe room. One night, however, not everyone was within the safe room. Suddenly, an overwhelming sense of terror creeped upon Darren as he was trying to sleep. He rushed to the safe room to attempt to stop what he was feeling, but quickly realizing he couldn't leave his family behind, he rushed back out of the room in an attempt to gather them and bring them to safety as well. As he was heading towards the stairs, his daughter had heard his cries and was now at the foot of the stairs. It was here that Darren saw her being lifted by invisible hands into the air and carried away from him. Screaming for his child as she screamed for her father, Darren ran down the stairs as fast as he possibly could, but couldn't see her anywhere in sight. He then heard her muffled screams coming from the basement. At first, the door was locked and wouldn't open, but after adrenaline and brute force, Darren thankfully was able to open it. He then retrieved his hysterical child and brought her to the safety of the safe room. Once inside the room, the family huddled together in fear as they continued to hear movement and noises all throughout the house. After this abhorrent nightmare of a situation, the family knew they had to get out of the house. This situation and the many other paranormal experiences had led to a lifelong fascination for Darren Evans with the occult and finding out just exactly what Zozo is. But was it worth jeopardizing his family's safety? It took some time, but the family would soon relocate to another home. And once his family was safe, Darren was able to continue his deep dive into the unknown to try and track down and decipher just what this entity could be and where it came from. And although he knew the topic was vast, I think it went far deeper than he ever anticipated. Whilst trying to dig up more information, he posted his experiences to an old paranormal forum in 2009, and since then, many people have shared their experiences with a demonic force, many of which have been documented and compared by Darren himself on his website. But these experiences are not just a 21st or even 20th century phenomenon. They date back far older than that. Not every fine detail will be mentioned here, but I will do my best to list the most important details that I could find in regards to the origin of Zozo, according to Darren and other online sources. Zozo, in the Old Basque language, means blackbird or crow. The Zo people of Haiti practiced a form of voodoo whose rituals involve horrific scarification, as well as the intake and passing around of bodily fluids and bizarre rituals. Their witch doctors are called Zozo and wear demonic-looking masks. As part of their death ritual, when someone is passing away, they lift up the mask at the moment of death to take in the person's final breath. This is apparently done to absorb the soul of the person to gain more spiritual power. Zozo, also in the Malay language, is the same as it is in English, but it translates to wandering spirit, which is a spirit they believe to steal people's souls while they sleep, which is also bizarre because sleep is often considered the cousin of death. Zozo has been called the minister of deception. It is known to convince you that it is a deceased loved one or friend, or even someone you've idolized, when in reality, it's not. Sessions typically start out friendly and inviting, but soon turn malevolent and dangerous. During his research over the years, Darren made contact with and spoke to famous demonologist John Zaffis, who shared with him that in his experience of over 40 years of studying the demonic and paranormal, the name Zozo and other pseudonyms of its name kept coming up in his investigations, which too led him to seek answers as to what it could be. And some of those investigations, when questioned, The demon stated that it was the son of Satan himself. But Zaphis thinks, perhaps as with many deities that seem to be lurking in the shadows, Zozo could be an entity that's existed far before the founding of Christianity. Besides evidence showing up in Africa and Egypt, there's also evidence found linking Zozo to ancient Mesopotamia as well. Other names Zozo has gone by throughout the ages have been Zuzu, Zaza, and Mama, among many others. The name Zuzu could refer to Pazuzu, the famed demon from the film The Exorcist, which in reality was a demonic entity from ancient Mesopotamian religion. It's incredibly strange to note the following as well. Zozo was replaced in the story of the exorcism of Roland Doe when Peter Blatty was using it as inspiration to write The Exorcist. He changed Zozo to Pazuzu. Zozo is believed to be the demon that possessed Roland. It was described as a terrifying form that first appeared in the Neo-Assyrian period, roughly around 934 to 610 BC. It had a monstrous head resembling a fierce lion or a dog with horns, and had an emaciated human body with clawed hands, a scorpion's tail, and 2 sets of wings. One translation reads, "I am Pazuzu, the son of Hanbu, king of the Lilu demons. I have scaled the powerful mountains. They trembled. The contrary winds were headed west. One by one, I broke their wings." Pazuzu and other demons like it were held responsible for ailments like disease, fetal death, nightmares, and much more. Could it be that this ancient demonic force is what could be plaguing people all the way into modern times? The demon Zozo is also mentioned in the French demonic encyclopedia as one of the demons responsible for diabolical possession and corruption. The possession of a young girl in 1816 is noted as a documented case where Zozo, among several other demons, were present. Other noteworthy possession cases over the ages, ranging closer to modern times, that bear Zozo's name, other than the exorcism of Roland Doe in the 1950s, are the possession of Doris Blither in 1972 in Los Angeles, the Enfield poltergeist incident in 1977 in the UK, and as recent as 2012, where a possession incident led to an attempted murder. Other theories with how this entity could communicate with so many people so quickly and across the globe over the years, besides supernatural ability of its own, would be that its own reach is perhaps being strengthened by an egregore, or a collective group of thought form created by occultists for a certain purpose. However, this seems unlikely considering the entity doesn't seem to serve any human interest, other than to destroy the person or people's lives it makes contact with. Egregores are typically formed to bring control over a summoned deity for the person or group's bidding. But perhaps instead there is a cult worshipping Zozo. I mean, that would make more sense to me. People who have made contact with the entity via a spirit or Ouija board have also been asked to chant or spell out phrases in Hebrew or Latin, which has convinced many of the intelligence of the being that they're speaking with. What is also interesting is that the letter Z was actually removed from the original Latin alphabet because it was considered too evil when pronouncing it. It was said that one's face would make a death's grimace, like that of a corpse, and that it mimicked the letter S, like an evil twin. Perhaps the entity uses this name as some sort of mocking, whether to God or something else. One may also ask, despite the origin theories and historical details that could be linked to this ancient demonic force, how would one know if they encountered such a thing? These are what's known as Zozo's calling cards when it's being summoned using a Ouija board. The obvious is there that the planchette will begin to move on its own, but some less obvious signs are there as well, and are as follows. The planchette will move in a rainbow pattern from side to side, spelling ZO, ZO, over and over again, also known as the rainbow effect. It can also move in repeating figure 8 movements, like an infinity sign. The planchette will spell out various versions of the demon's name, like Zozo, Zozo, Zaza, Zuzu, or Mama. You may also begin to see shadows moving around the area where you are hosting the session, like you're seeing through the thinnest sheet into a dark world that exists just behind your vision. And you and whoever you may be with may start to feel scared, uneasy, or upset, seemingly for no other reason, before or after this takes place. When you tell this entity goodbye, typically the best way to close a session, it may not truly be goodbye, because oftentimes, depending on how long the session has been for, like an ever-widening door, the entity may have had just enough time to sneak in to begin to wreak havoc upon your life. And thus begins what many demonologists and religious leaders alike call demonic obsession, which is where the entity becomes aware of you and begins to crave you, which then leads to oppression, or begins to inflict various forms of torture upon you in an effort to break you down, whether that's physically, psychologically, or spiritually. It will also work to isolate you from others, especially those who care about you. And finally, if you're incredibly unlucky, possession, where the entity finally takes control of you as its vessel. All of which to me are absolutely terrifying in every imaginable way. Darren Evans to this day continues to research the Zozo phenomenon, having been involved in a number of paranormal investigations, shows, and various other public and private events, as well as radio shows and podcasts, many of which he goes into various degrees of details regarding his encounters, other people's encounters, and other various historical details. He also in 2016 compiled his year's worth of research and experiences into a book, also titled The Zozo Phenomena, which you can read and learn more about the entity and the topic as a whole if you're interested. I'll link it below. I also pulled a lot of this information from various interviews, which I'll also be linking below, as well as an older website he runs that doesn't seem to have been updated in a while, but supplied me with much information to get the story as cohesive as I possibly could. I also sourced the photos of the apparitions from this site, some of which were taken by Evans himself over the years. So does this demon or ancient force truly exist? Is it some kind of elder god, a pre-Christian deity or being, or manifestation of occult or Luciferian practices? Did Darren Evans just make it up? And did thousands of people find it interesting enough to make up their own stories and partake in a mass charade that has lasted years? All of these answers may never truly be known, but my opinion is this. I think, not only given the wide array of strange coincidences and details throughout history, from the origins to the stories of this creature existing in distant past to the present, to literally thousands of people, from casual interest in the occult to more hardcore fanatics, religious scholars, demonologists, and more. claiming to have had experiences with this thing. With all of these details in mind, I certainly think it very well could be real. I do think there are things that exist in the shadows, things we can't see or touch, but that are there, watching and waiting to strike when and if the opportunity presents itself. So my advice to all of you, to avoid any possibility of opening a door that you can't close and inviting evil into your life, is this: don't mess with Ouija boards. These things are not toys, and whether you believe it or not, these entities do exist, and they believe in you. So keep away from them, because you might just let something in that won't want to leave, even if you say goodbye.
Man, where to begin with this one? This may end up being a little bit out of order, but so be it. So when I initially made the original Zozo video, the one that we just watched together, I didn't hear anything from Darren himself, but rather someone who claimed to be a friend of his, who went by the name of Butch, which is presumably an alias. Butch said that he had known Darren for a long time, and that he was a stand-up guy. He provided me screenshots of proof and whatnot of their relationship, so I believed him. Among those screenshots, Darren had said that, yes, the majority of the original homes in which the activity had taken place in still stood, including the house that was featured on Ghost Adventures, and that it was and is still standing and is located in Oklahoma City. I think I might have referred to Oklahoma City as a small city, and perhaps compared to some metropolises like Los Angeles or something. Maybe it is, but for the most part, it's considered fairly large, particularly in the Midwest, so my apologies there. But to my knowledge, it is a rental property, or was, and is more than likely occupied at the moment. So with that being said, please don't ever harass or bother anyone who might live there. Who even knows if they're aware of its particular significance anyways. Butch had also said that himself, along with others, and especially Darren as well, were scared to even mention the name, and albeit that seems to vary from show to show or blog to blog. Of course, if one did indeed have these horrendously scary experiences dealing with this entity, then one would be terrified to even mention it due to its possible return, right? But it also made me think that what if this was all some kind of tulpa? A tulpa, for those unaware, is a thought form or mental entity created through enough focused thought and visualization. Its concept originates from Tibetan Buddhism and has since been popularized in modern Western contexts. The concept describes a being with its own independent consciousness, personality, and will that is created by a person, sometimes referred to as a tulpamancer, and it doesn't really specify if the person has to be fully aware of what they are doing or not in order to create one. So this is speculative at best, but what if Darren inadvertently created this thought form and it started manifesting more in his life, and as time went on and it gained further strength, and due to its story or stories of it being disseminated through the internet, what if it then essentially took on a life of its own and began manifesting in other people's lives as well? Although Darren and some of my own research conclude that there may perhaps be references to a Soso or Zozo or Mama type entity throughout various ages and whatnot, we do know that Darren was a big fan of Led Zeppelin and probably still is. And this is something I didn't really mention in the previous video, the first one that is. But Jimmy Page, the guitarist for Led Zeppelin, who kind of deserves a video all of his own, was obsessed with the occult. And his favorite occult symbol, that he often used as a trademark of sorts of his works, was one that spelled the name Zozo, Z-O-S-O. So Darren, who maybe was already interested in the occult himself, and maybe had other occult-related experiences, might have inadvertently tied the two things together and one thing led to another, and we ended up with this tulpa that keeps showing up and gaining strength through various forms of media and exposure, kind of like what we're doing now, wink wink. And that's why it allegedly keeps showing up during people's Ouija board sessions. I'm curious that if it had some other type of medium or tool associated with it, like a scrying mirror for example, if we'd have the same results, or if we'd see the phenomena adapted to that said scrying mirror versus a Ouija board. If that isn't the case, then perhaps we are dealing with the real deal. It very well could be an actual entity that maybe we're not fully capable of understanding. It certainly seems to feed off negative energy, human curiosity, and exploits the doorway that is supposedly opened by a Ouija board. Or, and this is all devil's advocate speculation here, it's made up. But if it was all made up, the likelihood of a lot of other people having experiences would certainly be much lower. Now, people do want to be a part of things, whether they were or not, for one reason or another. It's called confabulation, or maladaptive storytelling, depending on the context and intent. Confabulation is often an unconscious act, where a person fills in memory gaps with fabricated but believable stories they genuinely believe are true. Maladaptive storytelling, however, is a broader term that can include more intentional lying to create a better self-image, even if it's harmful. So it is possible that maybe that's what's taking place. Or maybe, just maybe, the phenomena, the entity, or entities perhaps, exist and are waiting and lurking from the shadows. I wasn't sure if I was going to mention this or not, but here goes nothing. Darren, from what I recall, didn't say anything to me on the original upload of the Zozo story, but had since commented on my Demonology Archives video at some point, definitely early on when it had come out. And his comment, albeit I can't remember verbatim what he said, seemed angry with me for some reason. And this has happened with multiple people over the years, so he's certainly not the only one. But the comment has since been removed ages ago, but I thought it was worth addressing finally because maybe he'll watch this too at some point. During my rereading of the emails his friend had sent me, his friend told me that he had been dealing with some kind of copyright issues as a result of some deal that he had made with some project he was involved with. So if that's indeed the case, which honestly and understandably so, I'd be angry too. But that has nothing to do with me, bro. So to Darren, if he happens to be watching, I've done my best to respect your experiences, your bodies of work, and the latter, and I wish you nothing but the best. Whatever I did, which I'm not even sure what that was to upset you, it certainly was not done out of malice. With him as well as others, all information I provide, I get through a variety of sources. It's all publicly available knowledge. Those of us who are in this field, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, can't always find the contacts for those involved in cases we're asked to and end up covering. And I wanted to say this as well. If any of you watch my content, you'll see that I do my absolute best to be understanding and respectful when it comes to telling people's experiences, and reminding those who watch that these are real people with real lives, and that they need to be respected. That respect and empathy is incredibly important to me. I also, with others, and Darren is no exception here, do my best to link their case back to their bodies of work, whether it's blogs or books or other interviews or what have you. I want people to do their own research beyond just my videos, you know. But anyways, just wanted to lay all of that out there for the sake of being transparent and open as a person, as well as a creator. I have nothing but respect for those I deal with, and will continue to do my absolute best to uphold integrity with what I do. I'm sure that there are other details in this case specifically that I could provide, but honestly, it's nothing major aside from what I've already mentioned. And there are many informational bits that Darren has included in his blogs and books, all of which I will link down in the description below. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Hype it if you can, albeit the hype system definitely seems to be a broken feature at this point. Drop a comment letting me know your thoughts on the story as a whole, or if you have any recommendations or suggestions on what to cover in the near future. Subscribe if you aren't already, and watch another video of mine. Honestly, just watching and sharing my content helps me out an insane amount. If you'd like to further support my work or the channel, you can pick up any of my 4 books, which are stories from the archives, or other merch from my official store at mysteryarchives.myshopify.com. You can also join my Patreon at patreon.com/mysteryarchives, where you can get my content ad-free if you select the 2nd tier or higher. Other than that, guys, thank you so very much for your time and just for being an absolutely incredible community. This has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Stay safe out there from shadow-lurking demons and more, and I'll see you next time. Take care.